I've actually never been described as a prodigal son in an introduction before, but I'm honored at that, and I'm honored to be back here to celebrate this evening and to congratulate PPRC on the phenomenal work that it's done over the last 20 years. I actually almost didn't have a connection or a history with PPRC. I applied and was rejected twice for jobs at PPRC before Madeline finally relented and hired me as a young technical director and staffer. And quite frankly, it was totally reasonable for her to reject me because I knew almost nothing about pollution prevention in 1991 when PPRC was just getting going. But luckily, no one else knew much more than me at that time. It was so new that really no one else knew much. And PPRC was really, I think, groundbreaking at the time in moving the conversation away from control and hazard management. At the time, EPA was spending 99% of its budget was on pollution control, only 1% on pollution prevention. We had just finished a decade of really, I think, quite strong animosity of regulation versus deregulation, of free markets versus command and control, of environmentalists versus industry. And PPRC really came on the scene at a key time to say, really, we should be talking about prevention, we should be talking about collaboration, and we should be using information to drive innovation. And that really, now seems quite obvious. Prevention, collaboration, information, innovation. But at the time, I think was radical and was the place that I learned pretty much everything I know about pollution prevention. So I joined as one of the first employees. I think there were 4 of us in kind of 1.5 rooms in the Four Seasons Hotel. We shared 2.5 computers at the time. So on the day that we got a donation of 4 new Hewlett-Packard computers, I don't know if HP is still involved, but the donation, our productivity radically increased on that day. The day that Scott Butner, who's here, actually set up those computers and connected us through a dial-up modem to a top-secret mainframe in Hanford that allowed us to get on the internet. Really, the sky was the limit. It moved us, I think, forward and moved the efforts to provide information to key decision makers. The kind of vision of PPRC was really key. I'm going to date myself with a couple stories. In 1992, when we were first working, Madeline sent me over to the EPA to get the newly released toxics release inventory data. So I took a stack of 5.25-inch floppy disks down to the EPA's office, dropped them off, came back a week later, picked them up, brought them back, and fired them up in a program called DB2, and spent about a month trying to slog through this thing to find out what was in this data, what was being released in the Pacific Northwest, what was coming from industry, could we learn anything? Now fast forward to today, as Paula said, all of that information is now available in your hands, on your smartphone, in a store that at the time really no one had this information. The public didn't have it, industry didn't have it, even CEOs didn't know how much pollution was coming out of their facilities. We knew almost nothing about what was in our products, in our supply chains, in our factories. So this really, I think, was the starting point of a revolution in information systems, which has carried over today. Madeline and the PPRC board decided in that year to start very modestly. They chose to just focus on changing the oil and gas, pulp and paper, aluminum, and fishing industries in our first year. So it was, I think, this kind of amazing, Madeline's kind of sweet, can-do attitude, a kind of combination of Virginia meets Texas meets Seattle, that was just fearless in bringing industry, government, NGOs together in a way that I think really they hadn't been. And coming from, I had been working in DC, and the gridlock of DC, which seems almost identical to the gridlock of DC today. PPRC was a place where it was really amazing to work with their staff, to work with Department of Ecology, to work with the Washington Toxics Coalition, other great NGOs, and to work with industry here in the Pacific Northwest. Now, some industries obviously were more challenging than others to work with. Madeline, again, sent me up to an interesting oil and gas industry conference in Alaska in 1992, and I remember distinctly how cold it was. And I'm talking about inside the conference room. As the only environmental scientist there, it was a chilling reception. I also remember the lunch. They had massive steaks small potatoes, and chilled vodka at every table. So as a vegetarian, I focused on the vodka. And tried to figure out how to explain what this new idea of pollution prevention was to the oil and gas industry. And the response I got all day long was, we don't have an issue. We recycle everything. We just inject it all back in the ground. We have no waste at all. We're fully pollution preventing, which I thought was kind of the starting point of an interesting conversation, which has led, I think, to important strides over the last 20 years. So we've seen really interesting progress and successes of pollution prevention, of information-based regulations, and really learned that information provided in the right way to decision makers can really make a difference. And the kind of work that PPRC has done on peer learning, on training of trainers, on finding best practices, on sharing information can lead to innovations, to changes that really make a difference and that really move from the idea that we can command and control people to the idea that people can innovate on their own. So I've taken those lessons over the last few years of measuring what matters most, of preventing rather than controlling, and of using information to incentivize learning and innovation really throughout my career. The lessons I learned early at PPRC really have carried over. So concepts that were, I think, really nascent and foreign at that point, pollution prevention, life cycle assessment, industrial ecology, toxic use reduction, have, I think, really moved into the mainstream, where we're even hearing this year the CEO of Walmart talking about life cycle assessment, talking about changing their entire supply chains, talking about eliminating waste and not just driving down prices the way they normally do, but driving out energy, water, packaging, materials, and finding hundreds of millions of dollars in savings while doing that. The most cost-conscious corporation in the world that is now talking like a PPRC staff member. So really pretty amazing. Great work in green design, in green chemistry, in lean manufacturing. So we've seen a lot of really amazing changes. I want to talk very briefly, though, about one area that I have been working on most recently in taking this same thinking and taking it to consumers, a group that PPRC didn't initially focus on and has been left out, but that we as consumers are key parts of these global supply chains. We are key parts of the industrial systems that drive the environmental and health and social impacts that we're so concerned about. Now, so over the last few years, we've seen, unfortunately, a series of scandals in our product supply chains, from lead in our toys, to bisphenol A in baby bottles, to melamine in pet food, to E. coli in our food supply chain, that really has driven awareness among consumers, much greater awareness than ever before, particularly about products they put in, on, and around their families, what they're bringing into their home, what they're exposing their families to, where people now more than ever want to know what's in these products, where they come from, how they're made, what their impacts are on their health, the environment, workers, communities down these supply chains. Unfortunately, until very recently, consumers basically were in the dark ages. You went into a store and you knew brand and you knew price. You basically didn't know almost anything other than brand and price, which is kind of amazing. You didn't know the health impacts, didn't know the environmental, social things you care a lot about. So in a way, we're kind of today for consumers where we were in 1990 for industry and government, of really early phases, the kind of TRI 5¼ inch discs that I struggled with, we're struggling with consumers today. So what we've done with this project, first at UC Berkeley and then spun off campus, is to try to empower consumers with the kind of information that you all as decision makers get every day, and to allow them to find products that match their values, their health issues, their environmental or social concerns. So we've built a team of people, about 30 people in San Francisco, half scientists, half engineers. We've rated about 120,000 products, about 5,000 companies, for the kind of multi-attribute environmental, social, and health impacts of those products and companies. What we do on the web, on your phone, across the web, basically try to give you a really simple, high-level score. So out of 10, this product gets an 8.8. Then give a health score, an environment score, and a social score. We're basically trying to bring life cycle thinking to help people understand the impacts of the product and the supply chain behind the product on their health, the environment, and society. We've had to make this as simple as possible. This is consumers standing in the aisle, have about 20 seconds they'll spend making a decision about a product. So how can we take this complex world of information? We currently bring in about 1,000 different data sources on a simple product like this, about 200 data attributes that we would pull together to try to give people a really quick, simple way to evaluate how does it perform on issues they care about. If you want to, you can drill down into the information, go down to specific ingredients of concern that you found in that cosmetic that Paula mentioned, find out the climate impacts from the company, find out their policies and practices, find out if they test on animals, find out if they have women in senior management position. Whatever your issue is you care about, we want to get that to consumers right at the moment when they're making decisions. Of course, the main way you make decisions is in stores. About 5% of shopping is online, 95% is still in stores. So a lot of this is moving out onto mobile apps, on the iPhone and Android apps, trying to get to people right when they're making decisions. So our app, you can just point your phone at a barcode. Under a second, we'll tell you basically instantly how it performs on health, environmental, social performance, all then screened against your personal preferences. So we're not trying to get people to live like me, a Berkeley professor, but however they want to live, whatever issues they care about, to give them the right information. We also have an exciting tool that you can install in Firefox and Chrome, your browser, so that when you land on Amazon.com, you can get all this information as you look at products. So again, not a research project that you have to go over and do a bunch of work and study, but right when you're shopping to deliver this information, you can see across the bottom of the screen, all then filtered against your filters. We can tell you if it passes or fails your filters, as well as give you the science behind it if you want to know. And of course, every consumer cares about price and quality. So we're trying to bring together all of the pieces of information that matter right when a consumer makes a decision. All personalized. You can tell me you care about animal rights, someone else doesn't care about animal rights, you care about climate change, someone else doesn't. And then also to help people basically look at their consumption over time. We're trying to basically build the kind of learning and feedback tools that PPRC has been so good at to show how did I do, how are my products doing, and how am I doing, can I get better? The kind of Prius screen of feedback where people see that there's impacts of their choices, that they can actually make a difference, they can make their health better, the environment better by making these choices, and that there actually are alternatives, and you often can save money doing it. So we really see a kind of we are at the very starting points of a new empowered citizen/consumer. Someone who actually can potentially vote with their dollars, that can express their values. All of us have values around ethics, around society, around environment, around local, around whatever. And we really want to try to enable consumers to play a role in this, to use this information in their own decision making, to avoid bad products, first of all, but also to support products they feel good about. We're doing all sorts of interesting work because we're based down in Silicon Valley with social networking and really trying to combine the best of this technology with this world of the new social commerce, which is, in the parlance of Silicon Valley, we're trying to combine your social graph, that's usually through Facebook, who you know and who you trust, with your interest graph, what you care about, what issues matter to you, what health concerns you specifically have, and really bring that together to move people from believing marketing, from just trusting what's on the label or in the aisles, to getting the full information they need to make better decisions. So we're just at the very starting points of this. We've had about 10 million people use GoodGuide.com, about 500,000 have downloaded this app. So we're just really getting going and starting to learn really what matters to consumers, what information in what form, at what moment in their decision-making process can actually influence them, can actually be the kind of critical information that a decision maker needs and can use. We're also now moving to working much more with brands and retailers. We've focused entirely on consumers. This has, however, gotten the attention of brands. The fact that we're delivering information out to consumers at the moment of their purchases has, I think, gotten some interesting feedback. We're now working with a number of leading brands and retailers looking for ways to use this kind of science to identify key sustainability hotspots and key consumer hot button issues, to really find out what matters most scientifically and what matters most to consumers, to really first eliminate the hazards, eliminate the risk, eliminate the downside, but also then to drive towards innovation, to find better products, to find really products that better match the values of consumers, so that companies can move to a kind of collaborative co-production where they are so close to consumers, they are hearing what they need and what they want, that they're actually building better products that better match their values and that ultimately are more sustainable and better. So this, again, is just really, for me, has been a way to apply the lessons I learned very early on in my career at PPRC in this new consumer space. PPRC, I think, really has done an amazing job over the last 2 decades, and I wish it all the best for the next decade of work. It has, I think, been at the forefront of advancing sustainable development and this new way of thinking in the Pacific Northwest. and I think we've made some important progress. Not to be too negative, but of course I think we have major challenges ahead. I think as I look out, we are in many ways losing some of the biggest battles, particularly as I think about the role of consumers on climate change, on biodiversity loss, on water, on food systems, on obesity, on cancer rates, that there are many areas where there are increased challenges for an increased need for the work of all of you to focus on prevention, on collaboration, and on information to drive the initial vision of PPRC forward, I think, into the next generation. Again, unfortunately, I think there's little chance for movement in Washington, D.C. The action is going to be here. It's going to be in Seattle. It's going to be the state. It's going to be the regional level. It's going to be the local level. And it's going to be people like you. Local governments, local industry, local NGOs that are going to be driving innovation and demanding a different kind of consumption and a different kind of production that really can set the bar for where we can go as a society. So I want to wish Paula and all the staff of PPRC all of the best for the next 20 years of success and for taking on these pressing challenges. Thank you very much.